Okay, so we're back, and I took my shirt off so that people won't think that I wore the same thing for 3 weeks in a row instead of just 30 minutes ago. So hope we're
Wait,
okay
wait,
with that.
wait. You know what wait means?
No.
Over here it means you. And the appropriate response is me, which means hi, I know I did it.
Oh, that's another zip code law.
Yeah. Wait.
Why was our Constitution so effective?
Well, it was written, I don't think those men were religious, Scott.
No,
I think they were more concerned about natural law.
they were deist, and they believed in a creator. They believed in what you call source, and they believed that source had created this cosmos according to certain very precise laws.
Uh-huh.
So the point I'm trying to make is, okay, why should we care about this stuff? I think we should care a lot because our Constitution is amazing and it created a very powerful country. Now, I understand totally that we have fallen. We have departed in a tragic way from the original principles of our Constitution. But in the beginning, it was amazing. And the principles that we're talking about are implicit in the Constitution. They're not explicit. You'll never find it written, I don't believe, something about authority and responsibility or win-win decision making. But they're implicit. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence are all molded around these principles. The principles are the foundation of those documents. And the result of that is a country that brought freedom and liberty in a way that was just amazing. That's why we should care, because it works so good. It works so incredibly good when we actually pay attention to it. And then a little bit of history here. The founders, as probably most of us know, actually derived, maybe not in a carefully articulate way, but in sort of an implicit way again. They got the principles for the Constitution and Bill of Rights from the Bible. So you go back to the Bible, and it's the same thing again. These principles are in the Bible, but they're not explicitly stated. They don't say, okay, now we're going to talk about authority and responsibility. It never does that. It's implicit. For example, authority and responsibility would be revealed in the law where it says if you dig a pit for an ox, and your neighbor's ox falls in it, you owe your neighbor for the ox. That's
Right.
authority and responsibility. In other words, you had the authority to make a decision to dig a hole. Somebody else was harmed, and now you have responsibility to redress that harm. So we're not talking about anything that people disagree with or haven't encountered before. I think all we're doing is we're taking the moral law written on the heart. We're taking these principles that we all kind of know in a sense as kind of a background noise in the back of our head. We especially know them when they're violated to our harm. We're not so aware of them when we're violating them to harm others. And what we're doing is we're taking these principles and bringing them to the forefront of our mind and making them we're articulating them with more precise language. That's what we're about here. This is nothing new. I haven't discovered anything new. I've just maybe refined the language a little bit to find a different way to express these principles, to make them more available, to make them more of our common vocabulary. Does that make sense, Stuart, or what do you think?
Yeah, it does. And it's like you told me one time, once something has a name, it's kind of got a handle.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Hey, could I give a little background on that just for fun?
Sure.
But I was watching that documentary entitled The West, Ken Burns' The West, and they interviewed this Indian poet and mystic, and he said in Native American culture, he said something does not exist until we give it a name. And I thought that is so cool. So what we're going to do here is give natural justice a name.
That's awesome.
That is.
I think it's very transformative. And what I always teach is, are you happy with your life, or do you see areas where there could be some improvement. Every hand goes up. I could do some improvement. Okay. How are you going to improve? The only way you're going to improve is to make better decisions.
Mm-hmm.
The only way you're going to make better decisions is to get better information.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just sharing better information. That's all we're doing. And we leave it up to the listener. Do you want to change your life or go on doing the same thing?
I met a guy several years back, and he was religious in a way that I am not. And we got to talking, and we got into a confrontation, or a little bit of an argument about the subject of eternal torment, and that God will eternally torture people in eternal conscious torment. And natural law has a problem with that, and therefore I do as well. And he suddenly looked at me, his eyes as wide as pie plates, and said, "Are you telling me that you have discovered or know something that all of the Bible religious teachers of the last 2,000 years have not discovered?" And I didn't know how to answer. It was an uncomfortable thing, and I said, "Yeah, in a way, I haven't discovered anything, but I've found language for something that is so powerful." Because if let's say, for example, you're watching the news and you see conflict on the news. Well, that's pretty standard fare, isn't it? There's always going to be conflict on the news. Mm-hmm. Somebody's in trouble with somebody else. And just begin to observe it. It just sit there with a mental microscope and diagnose the issue. Who's treating the other person in a way that they wouldn't want to be treated? Who's violating the law of non-contradiction by using double standards or dishonesty, lies, for example? Or who is taking authority without the corresponding responsibility? And it's just it's a dead ringer on every point. And what I found is most conflicts violate almost every principle of natural justice. Not just one. See, they're intertwined. Yeah. You violate one, you end up violating almost all of them.
Yeah, you do. What I teach is that when a child is born, they don't think, they only feel. Mm-hmm. So they don't have authority, but neither do they have the responsibility. If you don't take care, if you don't take care of that child, the child is going to die. But as we mature, I think our job as parents is to transfer responsibility to our children so that they gain more authority in their life.
Shall we dig into it right at that point?
Yeah, let's dig into it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Authority and responsibility. The fact that authority should always be in equilibrium with responsibility. If you have authority, you need to have a corresponding responsibility. So let's start with the child.
Yeah.
And I should ask this question. Does somebody disagree with this? If you disagree,
if they do, put it in the comments.
Put it in the comments. Step forward and tell me, okay, I understand that many of us enjoy having authority without responsibility. I get that. But how many of us want responsibility without the corresponding authority to mitigate or limit our liability? None of us. Nobody wants responsibility without authority. Nobody in the world.
Well, there would be people that would counter you, probably because they don't understand what you're saying. They would say,
that could be.
Just let me be the worker. I don't want to be the boss because I don't want to have that authority.
But that's fine. But they would also not want the responsibility when the restaurant failed. Let's just do a little thought experiment. So you're a manager in a restaurant, and the boss says, "Okay, you have full responsibility for how many dinners that are sold, for how much profit we make. You have to identify the source for the food that we're going to buy to prepare the meals with. Everything is on you. You have full responsibility, but you have no authority to hire, to choose who is hired. You have no authority to choose who is fired. You have no authority to establish the price of the meals or the quality of the food we use. Nothing. You have full responsibility and absolutely no authority to limit the liability that you have with your responsibility." Who would sign up for that? Nobody.
That's a slave. That's a definition of a slave.
That's a slave.
And the guy on the other side who has all the authority without taking responsibility is a tyrant.
That's a tyrant. That's the dictator of the country who enjoys total authority. His word is the word of God, so to speak. and he takes no responsibility for the good of his people, the welfare of his people.
But Scott, that happens all the time in politics, religion, big businesses. And I have a question for people who aren't trustworthy or dependable. How do you work with those people? Because they don't take responsibility very well.
Well, let's start with the child, because let's take an infant. The child is born, and the parent has full authority and responsibility. And I know there's oversight by the state. I get that. But in general, the parent has authority and responsibility. So the child has the child is in the condition that you just mentioned. They're not trustworthy. You can't depend on them for anything. So the child has zero authority and zero responsibility. So now we begin the process of a scheduled transfer. It's what you were alluding to before. A scheduled transfer over the years until they're 18 or 21 years old. A scheduled transfer of authority and responsibility as a pair, always in equilibrium, but that pair of authority and responsibility is gradually transferred from the parent to the child according to its ability to meet those standards. If you can actually harm your child in two ways. By having authority and responsibility out of balance, for example, giving it too much responsibility without the corresponding authority. Or another way is transferring the authority and responsibility, even if they're in equilibrium, transferring those too quickly to the child or too slowly. An example of too slow of a transfer is the kid is 25 years old, living in the basement, and helicopter mom won't let him date.
Right.
An example of a too rapid transfer is the 10-year-old that's given to the keys to the car and says, "Okay, Billy, you need to be careful and be sure and you stop at that stoplight." The kid's not able to have that much authority and responsibility, even if they're in equilibrium. So there's two ways to violate the principle: by transferring too slow or too fast, or by having it out of balance.
Okay, so in a religious world, I think people in leadership love to tell other people, you must do this, you must do that, but they don't take responsibility for the outcome. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
That would be almost the default. And it's not
they
because
don't take responsibility for the failed life.
And I wouldn't even say it's because these leaders are so bad. I think they're just so unaware of these principles. It's kind of the default to use them to your advantage and dismiss them when they don't give you advantage.
I think you said something one time about we can't use force in matters of faith.
That's another principle. That is another principle.
But doesn't that connect with authority and responsibility?
They're all connected. What the principle is you cannot presume authority, act with the presumed authority on matters of faith and belief. And that's actually related, just a little teaser here, that's related to a verse from the Apostle Paul where he says there's no transgression of the law if there is no law, or said another way, if there's no proof of the law, then there can be no transgression of the law. And also, that's what our presumption of innocence in our Department of Justice is based on. You know, one of the great things about our country is you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. Believe it or not, that's based on this principle, even though it's never been articulated in just this way. But that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if there's no law or knowledge of law, you know, I'm involved in a farming operation in Uganda as an advisory member, but I'm deeply involved, and so I see the different tribes, the different zip codes, you call it, cultures, and like some tribes they have bad values. Mm-hmm. They value stealing animals. And so if a child
I'm sorry, Stuart, doing what to animals?
Stealing.
Oh, stealing. Theft. Committing
Yeah.
theft.
Theft. So if they're raised with that belief, do they still know inside that it's wrong?
You mentioned in the last segment, Stuart, something about searing the conscience. Can that be done with enough insults to the moral law written on the heart? Can't that be basically quieted?
I think so, yeah. Because the reason they do this is you have to have cattle to prove that you're a man. You have to have cattle to marry a wife, for the dowry. And so the only obvious way to get it is to steal. You got to start your herd somehow, right?
Yeah. But I wonder if they know better, because when they come home and their favorite prize cow has been stolen, never to be recovered, are they cool with that?
No.
So they know better.
So they know better.
They have a double standard, don't they?
Good, they do have. Good point. Double standard. We didn't add that one.
That's the law of non-contradiction. Two things that are not in agreement cannot be true at the same time.
Okay.
So if it's wrong to steal, it's wrong for somebody to steal from you. It's also wrong for you to steal from them.
Yeah. So they know.
They know. They know.
Plus they have fear. If they steal your cattle, they have fear.
Yeah, why are they afraid? They've
That's
insulted
right.
something in the universe here. We know better. Yeah.
So really, people are not guiltless.
There are levels of accountability. If you study these principles for years, I believe you become painfully accountable.
Uh-huh.
But everyone is accountable to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. So what's some other illustrations? I think you told me one time, like a child is maybe 16 and he's got a motorbike, and dad said, you have to wear the helmet when you're driving the motorbike. And the child says, no, I don't have to wear the helmet if I don't want to.
Yeah, isn't that a good one?
Yeah, and his dad says, as long as I'm paying your hospital bill, I'm taking responsibility. I have the authority to tell you to wear your helmet.
Yeah, there's a $100,000 doctor bill because of that big bump on the head. And who's going to pay that? The 16-year-old kid who wrecked his motorcycle, or dad or mom? Mom and dad are going to pay that, right? So if they have the responsibility, they have the corresponding authority to limit their liability. Let's explore a couple more areas where natural law can answer some questions. Let's say you have a blended family. Mom and dad divorced. And so there's a blended family that comes into play. And so let's say that the man is with a mother who has her child and it's not his own. And let's just do a thought experiment here. And they move into his house. He's providing the house and the education and the food and the transportation and all that. I mean, how many times has that man heard this claim? You're not my dad. I don't have to do what you say. What does authority and responsibility have to say about that?
Boy, you're putting it right there where the rubber meets the road now. What he has to say is, if I'm providing everything for you, I'm taking responsibility for you, I have authority over you.
Exactly.
But rebellion, which is in all of us, doesn't like that.
No, it doesn't. But rebellion, what are you rebelling against? Natural law. Good luck with that.
Yeah, you're sowing and reaping.
If that kid moves into an adult's house and that adult is buying their lunch ticket, providing transportation to soccer practice, is responsible for their medical bills, their groceries, their safety. If somebody breaks into the house at night to harm the family and that man is responsible for protecting that kid, that man or that woman, whoever it is, has a corresponding authority.
Okay, let's do another one. If we're doing thought experiments, how about a religious organization that pits the children against one of the parents because that parent is no longer a member of that organization. That's violating God's law right there.
No, they're violating all the principles. I could just go down the list. That's a dumpster fire at that point.
Because that's the first commandment with promise. Honor thy father and thy mother, that it may be well with thee, and that you may have, long years? But it happens all the time. Okay, you're aware of David Hawkins, right?
Yeah.
Okay, in the lower energy scale, in the survival paradigm, the only way to motivate other people is through intimidation and manipulation with the intent to dominate. And that's exactly what's happening right there. They're pitting one family member against the other family member to what? To dominate. To force them to do what they want them to do. In the upper energy zone, where we understand this law of justice, is we inspire each other. So you can inspire anyone. You can inspire anybody in the higher energy zone and the lower energy zone, but you can't intimidate somebody who refuses to be intimidated. So this is something that when you're working with people, the higher your spiritual level or energy zone is, the more influence you have in humanity. Authority. If you want more authority, take more responsibility.
That's it. Boy, that's a good point. It's interesting how this works. So authority equals responsibility. Authority, responsibility equals sign. But the way the universe is made, if you grab authority, it turns to dust in your hand. The only way to lawfully get more authority is to take more responsibility. And think that through how it works. So again, you're in a restaurant, you're the man. Let's say you're just, you have a menial job in a restaurant. And you're not the person that says, well, that's not my job. That's not part of my job description. I ain't going to do it. So you begin to take more responsibility. You do things that are not part of your job description. You do going above and beyond. And guess what happens? The manager notices, gives you a raise, and puts you in a higher position, begins to give you more authority and responsibility. But you got that authority by taking more responsibility, not just by declaring yourself to be a boss, but by taking more responsibility. That's how it works. That's the lawful way to get more authority. Yeah, and I think we should all want more authority because that's just basically becoming personally empowered, personal empowerment.
Oh, yeah, because you look at the street kids here in Kenya. Do they have any authority? No, they don't get to choose what they eat because they're not taking responsibility. They don't get to choose what they're wearing because they're not taking responsibility. I think when you take responsibility for yourself and you gain authority over your life, then you have authority. What shall I eat today? What shall I wear today? Which kind of a house shall I live? Which rent or buy? Which it goes on and on and on. And you gain it.
That decision making that you're talking, that ability to make more decisions is simply freedom. But let's talk about another couple of examples. This one gets a little dicey. Let's take the welfare system. Suppose that somebody has fallen on hard times, and it's our job to take care of them. In other words, we're going to take full responsibility for them. In our current culture, the way it's set up is we have full responsibility for people who depend on state services, but no authority. That's a problem. In other words, technically, and this would bother some people, if I have to feed somebody else, that gives me the authority to have some say on what that food is, whether it's Marlboros or soda or something healthy. That's the way this works, and this is where it gets uncomfortable for people. How many children can they have? If I'm supporting them, can they continue to have children one after another because that's their right? Or does authority and responsibility have something different to say about that?
You want to get really dicey, Scott?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Let's go.
What about drug testing them?
Absolutely. Authority and responsibility is a bulldozer to ideology. We have these ideologies, but natural law has something different to say many times. Not all the time, but many times.
Okay, how about, I'll probably get kicked off for this one, but we'll throw it out anyway. How about the only people who can vote are taxpayers?
You know how to apply the principle, Stuart. I don't have to help you. I'm not responsible for the principle.
Right.
It's just my job to recognize it and harmonize with it.
As much as we can, yeah.
Exactly.
And make people aware. I think it's for you and I, a big part of our fulfillment in life, our purpose in life is to help people become aware.
Yeah.
Because you can't fix something. You can't fix something that you don't know is broken.
That's true. And also, authority and responsibility, these principles are like a bulldozer in many ways, but they need to be applied with understanding and compassion.
Absolutely.
You can't apply them like a sledgehammer because you'll do harm that way. There's one more I'd like to talk about before we terminate this, and that's on how it answers the question to open borders. Because let's say there's two ranchers and they're both grazing cattle, and one rancher is very conscious of the environment, a good steward of grazing practices, and the other one likes to overstock and graze all year, regardless of the rainfall and that kind of thing. Authority and responsibility deals with this idea of jurisdiction. In other words, the only way to fix that problem is with a fence. And so that one rancher has authority and responsibility over his part of the pasture on his side of the fence, and the other one has authority and responsibility on theirs. Because if you, without the fence, the good steward is going to be taking responsibility for the other rancher's bad decisions. So this is an example of how the principle can actually deal with this question of open borders that some people are enamored with.
Yeah, we have a responsibility. I mean, and the interesting thing is, Scott, some of these lawmakers that advocate for open borders, they have huge fences around their own compound.
Yeah, so that's a double standard.
It's a double standard.
So yeah, these principles are just incredibly powerful. Once you understand them, know how to apply them, just watch the news and go through the list of the principles and see how many are being violated and what could be fixed if they were honored. It's just amazing. So that's where we want to go.
Yeah, this is a big principle. Authority, the balance of authority and responsibility, and teaching our children, teaching those that we come in contact with.
Okay, Stuart, I think we've given enough of a teaser that people kind of understand how the principle works. So,
well, they have a good opportunity to understand anyway.
Yeah. So, okay, well, thank you, Stuart. And we will meet again.
Yep.